Joining us now, Tony Pham. Tony from Richmond, the Henrico area. He's a new interim ICE director since August, and he's a Vietnamese refugee. He's been on my phone. He ran for office before when we used to have him all the time, and his family just got harassed at their home, and he's the director of ICE. Tony, great to have you, man. It's been a long time.
John, thank you so much. Grateful for the opportunity to jump on your show to have a conversation with the American people.
Let's talk about your transition from when you ran for office in Richmond to now being the interim director for ICE in the Trump administration. Walk us through how you got there.
Oh, no. Let me first, John, say I'm grateful for the president. I'm grateful for the Department of Homeland Security for this great opportunity to serve my country and serve my president, our president, forgive me. The transition wasn't really a difficult one. You know, when I ran for office in 2015, I ran to be the chief prosecutor for the locality, and the role was to apply the law as it was written, the criminal law, and hold individuals accountable. Obviously, now in my role as the acting director for Immigration Customs Enforcement, our role is to protect the American people and our communities from cross-border crimes, human trafficking, illegal immigration. We cover the gambit, so my role is to assist the organization moving forward by applying the laws, over 400 of them, to those particular subjects for public safety purposes.
Wow, you know what? How long have you been there? What was it, August?
Well, yes.
As the interim director.
In September, I was actually the principal legal advisor, the chief attorney for ICE, and I've received the opportunity to step into the breach as the acting director beginning of September. So I'm getting ready to round out my fourth full week so far.
What has been your biggest shock since you've been there? Your biggest surprise, Tony Pham?
My biggest surprise is just the misunderstanding that folks in the general public would have as to what we are really about. And then also the vitriol that is out there right now against, the honorable employees of ICE who come to work every day just to quietly apply the law as we have asked them to do in an enforcement capacity. And I'm just surprised at how the issues of legal immigration and illegal immigration have been conflated by some individuals out there, the loud voices of the minority who want to, mix the two bags and to confuse the American public. You know, we're all for legal immigration. You know, we want folks to follow the process and the pathways to citizenship, but we also have the rule of law, which is what this country is built on, that protect individuals in our communities. But, we need folks to be able to honorably enforce those laws, and that's what the men and women of ICE do every day. And so I was a bit taken aback. I shouldn't say completely surprised, but I took it on as a challenge to do the best I can to do what we can to change the narrative of how our folks are being characterized out there in the community.
Tony Pham, I've followed your career. I'm so proud of what you've been able to do, the interim director of ICE, part of the Department of Homeland Security. I hope you continue in the position because I think you bring a lot of maturity to it and certainly experience knowing what your parents went through in order to get to the United States. And remember you telling me that story, telling our audience, I should say, that story on the air of how your family escaped in the final minutes, really, on a helicopter, and then you were on a ship and all that, and how you were rescued is an amazing story of how you got to the United States and position, Tony, that you have now. Let's get to the incident at your home,
Sure.
Where mobs came to your home, where your family is, and berated your family. Tell us exactly, in your words, what happened.
You know, John, like I said, what happened was those rioters, those anarchists, those violent protesters, right? I want to begin by saying, as an attorney, and you know me, I value and I cherish the First Amendment just as much as I would cherish the Second, right? But that's for peaceful protest to articulate a particular position in a peaceful manner. What happened on the 8th, no less than 8 days in my role, as I was still trying to figure out where the water cooler was, these folks targeted my wife and my kids when they should have been taking their issues up with me at my office, but instead they chose to invade the sanctity of a person's home and target children. And that's what happened. They were screaming epithets. They were, saying some really vile and nasty things, encroaching on a person's private property, to try to harass, bully, and intimidate to get to me by getting through my family. And I'm going to spend a lifetime apologizing to my loved ones for what happened to them. But I want the listeners to understand and recognize that if they're allowed to do that, and if that's what they choose to do to me, then, it's no holds bar at this point for these violent protesters to try to target innocent people. They elevated it to coming onto someone's residence, and that's a bit beyond the pale. And that's what really happened.
Tony, Pham with us, acting interim director, ICE. The mobs came to his home about 2 weeks ago, targeting, he says, his children and his wife. Tony, were you home at the time? And what time? Give us about the exact time this happened.
It was in the afternoon. I wasn't home. I obviously being in charge of a rather large federal law enforcement component, it required me to be present in my office the majority of the week. And so I wasn't home, and that's what added to some of the pressure and stress. But, we expected it to come down the pike. I expected it to be me that they were protesting. I just didn't expect these individuals to have zero respect for the sanctity of individual family members, to target someone's family with regard to their dislike or disdain to certain policies and practices that my organization have. And I hope the listeners understand that, we need to come out in a very unified and loud voice condemning that type of behavior, because it has zero place in our American civilized society, where regular folks like you and I, John, need to be able to engage in civilized discourse.
Tony, for our listeners that know you from your time in Henrico, did this happen in Northern Virginia, or did this happen at your home in Henrico?
This happened in my home in Central Virginia.
Okay, so at your home in Central Virginia, you're at work in Washington.
Yep.
And so mobs come and they harass your wife and your children in your home.
Yes.
Was there a law enforcement response? What happened?
There was a law enforcement response, and on that note, it's a continuing open investigation right now, and I certainly don't want to comment any further. Obviously, from my background in law enforcement, John, when matters are open file, I kind of shy away from commenting further, not to impact the progress.
Is it fair to say that during this mob rounding invasion, I guess, of your home where your family is it fair to say that your wife and your children were terrified by this?
It's fair to say that, but I don't want to also mitigate and forget that this impacted an entire neighborhood, a community. Right? If you saw the video, there were fellow neighbors with their children outside. These folks who came there had zero respect for not just my family, but every other family that was out there in our neighborhoods. And that to me just showed a complete uncivilized approach to having a meaningful and thoughtful discussion. These folks actually came to my office, but saw fit to leave my office space during the protest to travel to get to my home, knowing full well I was in D.C. And so, again, for folks out there, they for those that are the silent majority who are sitting by and watching these things unfold, I just challenge your listeners to be silent no more.
Well, Tony, I think that's the message, because it's happening. It happens to Tony Pham and his family. You're not even home. And they knew you weren't home. They knew you were at work. So they went there specifically to terrorize your children and your wife and your family and the neighbors around you. So the question now, Tony Pham, becomes, where does this end? When is it going to happen to me? When are they coming to my house? When are they coming to my subdivision, my neighborhood? When are they coming through the gates that a lot of these people have in Northern Virginia, through the gated communities? I mean, they'll just go through them. But you got to ask yourself, if it can happen to Tony Pham, and it can happen to Sarah Sanders, and it can happen to all these people, why can't it happen to us? And, I mean, isn't that a question now that every family has to ask? Am I next?
I would agree. Yeah, that's absolutely right, John. And that's something that folks should really have in the back of their mind, that if individuals in the community decide to take on employment or express an opposing viewpoint, should they themselves expect to be targeted, and that's
by
not a good
mobs.
feeling. Yeah, absolutely. That's not a good
By
feeling
mobs. I
to
mean,
have.
it's one thing to say I'm going to get targeted in social media and I'm going to call names and I'm going to get doxxed or whatever, and
Oh, that's happening, right? That's happening.
that's like every day. I mean, that's part of it, and so a lot of us that I mean, if you go on social media and Google my name, I get a hit piece on me every day. It's just fodder. You learn to deal with that. But it's another thing when you're out of town and your wife and children are being terrified by mobs. And here's the other issue that people have, Tony, and I'm going to be very upfront here. When we looked at the couple in Missouri, in suburban St. Louis, who was terrorized, and they came out brandishing a firearm, they were the ones that got indicted. They were the ones now, and that guy's a lawyer, so I mean, he can defend himself and he's got a lot of money. But an average guy or gal at home, I mean, they don't have thousands of dollars to defend themselves with lawyers laying around. So you have a firearm. If you take it out, you're the one that's going to get indicted, even though they're terrorizing your children. Kim Gray, who you know, running for mayor in Richmond, councilwoman, served in McAuliffe's administration, etc. Really nice lady, young children. I mean, out in front of their home one night, they got lasers, they got cans. She told me her children were terrified. They still haven't gotten over it. They're afraid to go outside. I mean, how can we allow this, Tony, to happen in America?
We can't. We really can't. I mean, it's time that we stand with our men and women in uniform and law enforcement, and we support them and show them that we support them because they are on that line between chaos and order. And I challenge the folks who are sitting here quietly. What happened to me strengthened my resolve. What happened to Kim, I hope, strengthens her resolve to continue on in the life of public service, because it isn't easy, John. It certainly isn't easy in today's environment, but it strengthened my resolve to continue my journey to serve my country and our president in a manner that shows folks confidence that we're going to move forward and we're not going to be intimidated, nor are we going to be bullied into capitulating to a particular viewpoint. So that's my statement. I know it took me a while. When I first had to endure those emotions, I didn't look at it as the acting director. I approached it very emotionally as a father and a husband who was in protection mode at that point. And you're right. Mm-hmm. Had I been home, I don't know what would have happened. Having seen what happened in Missouri, but I would hope to think that reasonable minds would begin to emerge in this national dialogue between chaos and order, and be able to step up and step forward and be able to support our men and women in uniform, because those are the individuals that serve honorably every day to keep peace around our country.
So, Tony, you're a long-standing law enforcement lawyer, and you're a veteran of the law and law enforcement. So, if this happens to someone, and they have firearms in their home, and their home is surrounded by protesters, what is your advice to them? What should they do? What's the blueprint?
Oh, John, having license to practice law, I certainly don't want to begin to provide legal advice on the air to individuals that are not necessarily my client. But, I will say this, simply put, that, at the end of the day, if they're feeling that their lives are being endangered, again, they have to take reasonable measures to protect themselves. And that's the best we can say. Certainly call the police, do what my wife did immediately. That way, the response is forthcoming, because, again, even with the national dialogue happening right now, John, and I when you call 911, even though they're being vilified, the men and women who wear that shield, that badge, they are still going to respond. They're going to respond, and they're going to put themselves in harm's way to protect the innocent folks. So my first and foremost piece of advice is to make that phone call 911, get that response out there, so that way we can allow the professionals to be able to protect us when we're being targeted. Tony
Pham, let's get back. I've got a couple more minutes. Tony Pham with us, yes, Acting Director of ICE, part of the Department of Homeland Security. Tony and I go way back in his days where he was running for various offices. What did you run for? Was that Commonwealth's attorney, right?
John. Yes, sir.
Was that Commonwealth's attorney?
Yes, sir. I ran for one office.
And that you got beat by Sharon Taylor, or do I have that mixed up?
No, I did. I was a Republican nominee, and then I went to the general election in November 2015 and did not prevail.
And I think now she's running for lieutenant governor or something. Wow. Okay. So Tony Pham, now the acting director of ICE, part of the Department of Homeland Security, got 2 more minutes. Your top priority between now and December 31st, what is it?
We're going to be threefold, looking at changing the narrative out there and the characterization of the men and women that honorably serve ICE. Obviously, we're going to be putting on some additional operations involving sanctuary policies around the United States. John, I can talk about these horrific sanctuary policies that many different localities have and how that actually adversely impacts the safety of the residents in those particular localities. But we're also going to be exploring, certain laws that were passed by Congress many years ago that are now being dusted off the shelf, and enhancing our abilities to target gang members and violent sexual predators and place them in removal proceedings, so that way we can have them removed from the country so they can't prey on our innocent individuals in our communities anymore. So those are, as a law enforcement personnel, those are my top priorities. But also, lastly, to really begin to untie and untangle this conflated conversation about legal and illegal immigration. There's a distinct difference between the two, and our role as ICE, as the enforcement arm of immigration, is to focus on the illegal immigration part. But John, if I may, since I have a few seconds left, you mentioned about the sacrifices of my parents. I can't let it go without saying that there were so many others. I focus on the 58,000 veterans and military personnel who lost their lives in Southeast Asia and were not able to come home in 1975 and sacrifice so much, and the additional 1,200 who are still missing in action. They served their country honorably. They paid the ultimate price so a young child could one day grow up, run for office, grow up as an immigrant, a refugee here in America, run for office, put that billet on his bucket list, and then also find his way to serving his country as the acting director of Immigration Customs Enforcement. It's a true testament of how great this country is, how great this nation is as a nation of opportunity. So I just wanted to let your listeners know how grateful I am simply for having the opportunity to serve them in our community.
Tony Pham, thank you for being with us. It's been too long. I'm sorry what your family has had to go through, but thank you for taking the time to share that. I don't think there's a better person to be leading ICE than Tony Pham, and serving the Trump administration and all of America. Tony, thank you for being with us. My best to your wife and your family.